Dr. Sage here. In today's lecture, we're going to talk about the seed plants covering chapter 26. So there are two categories of seed plants. Those are called the Gymnosperms and the Angiosperms. The first seed plants appeared about 400 million years ago. The Angiosperms, which are the flowering plants, are the most recently evolved plants. Seed plants are evolutionarily very successful due to the evolution of the seed. Why? Because the seed protects and provides food for the embryo, allows dormancy, which allows the clock to be stopped to survive harsh conditions before germinating. The later development of fruit enhanced seed dispersal, and that involved lots of coevolution between seed plants and animals. Also, we had the evolution of pollen, which means that the dispersal of sperm no longer required traveling through water. So what is a seed? The seed is the embryo of the plant and is protected by integuments. Integuments are an extra layer or two of sporophyte tissue, and it hardens into the seed coat. The seed also contains food supply for the developing embryo. Seed plants produce two types of gametophytes, microgametophytes and megagametophytes. The microgametophytes are the males, and you find them within pollen grains. They're dispersed by wind or a pollinator, and there's no need for water for them to travel. The megagametophytes are the females. They develop within an ovule, and they're enclosed within diploid sporophyte tissue in angiosperms. There are 5 phyla of living seed plants. Within the Gymnosperms, we have the Conifers, the Cyads, the Netophyta, and the Ginkgo Biloba. And then within the Angiosperms, we have the Angiophyta. So let's talk about the Gymnosperms first. Gymnosperms are plants with naked seeds. There are 4 living groups. We'll go through each of them one by one. The Gymnosperms all lack flowers and fruits, which the Angiosperms have, and they all have an ovule exposed on a scale. The first phyla of the Gymnosperms are the Conifers. These are the most familiar Gymnosperm phyla. So if you think about a Gymnosperm that you've seen yourself, you're most likely thinking of a conifer. These include pines, spruces, firs, cedars, and others. A couple of notable examples: the coastal redwood is the tallest living vascular plant, and the bristlecone pine is the oldest living tree. Within the conifers, as an example, we're going to talk about pine reproduction. So the gametophytes, remember that's a haploid generation, are found in the cones on the pine tree, so pine cones if you think about pine cones. You have the microgametophyte. Remember, that's the male gametophyte. You find them within pollen grains. Pollen grains are made in male cones, which are smaller and made up of modified leaves. The megagametophyte, that's the female. That's where you'll find the ovule. These are found in larger cones. The ovule is on the scale of these cones. So if you think of a pine tree that has pine cones, what you'll find on the upper branches is what you'll think of as more familiar pine cones. These pine cones contain the megagametophyte and the ovule, and you'll find the egg there. The male cones grow on the lower branches. In the male cones, you'll find the pollen grains, which is where the microgametophyte is, and the sperm cells are found inside the pollen. Next phyla of gymnosperms are the Cyads. These are slow-growing gymnosperms found in tropical and subtropical regions. The sporophytes resemble palm trees, and female cones can weigh 45 kilograms. Next phyla of the gymnosperms are the Netophytes. These are the only gymnosperms with vessels in their xylem, and there's 3 genera that make them up. The last phyla of the gymnosperms are the Ginkgophytes, and there's only one living species of these, that's the Ginkgo Biloba tree. They have flagellated sperm, and in these trees, the male and female reproductive structures form on different trees, as opposed to forming on the same tree like in the pine trees. Next, we have the Angiosperms. These are the flowering plants, and Angiosperms have 2 key adaptations, which is flowers and fruits. There are 2 main groups of Angiosperms, that's the monocots and the eudicots. So Angiosperms have flowers. The flower is an angiosperm structure specialized for sexual reproduction. Many species are pollinated by insects or by animals, so think about bees or hummingbirds, while some species are wind pollinated. Okay, within the flower, you have the stamens. Okay, so The stamens consist of a stalk called a filament, with a sac called an anther, which is where the pollen is produced. Okay, remember, inside the pollen you have the male gametophyte, which produces the sperm. Then you have a carpel. The carpel consists of an ovary at the base and a style leading up to a stigma. Okay, the stigma is where the pollen is received. So if we look at what's going to happen within the flowers, you have the anthers that are producing the pollen grains. Okay, the pollen grains contain the microgametophyte, that's the male gametophyte. Then you have the ovaries that contain the ovule. This contains the megagametophyte, which is the female gametophyte, okay, which is going to produce the egg. The pollen grain will land on the stigma and will grow a pollen tube. This pollen tube will grow down to be able to reach the ovule. The pollen tube will then deliver sperm to the egg, and the sperm will fertilize the egg, resulting in the diploid embryo, which is the next generation, the sporophyte generation. Another adaptation of the angiosperms are fruits. A fruit typically consists of a mature ovary, but can also include other flower parts. Mature fruits can either be fleshy or dry. Fruits produce seeds and aid in their dispersal. Seeds can be carried by wind, water, or animals to new locations. So first thing you know, when we're talking about fruit, we're not talking about the nutritional definition of fruit, okay? So things are fruits that you might not think of as being fruit. So like tomato is a fruit, hazelnut is a fruit, nectarines are fruits, milkweed is a fruit. The main purpose of a fruit is to allow the seed to move to a new location. Now we have two types of angiosperms, monocots and eudicots, and they have some differences. The monocots have a single cotyledon, the dicots have two. The monocots have long, narrow leaves with parallel veins. The dicots have broad leaves with a network of veins. The monocots have their vascular tissue bundles scattered throughout, whereas the dicots have vascular bundles in a ring. The monocots, their flowers occur in groups of three. So you can see there's three here and then three here, the petals of that flower. Whereas the eudicots, the flower parts occur in multiples of four, usually five. Other differences, monocots do not produce true wood. Monocots are grasses, palms, or herbaceous. Eudicots do produce true wood. Now, true wood has secondary growth. Remember, all plants have primary growth at the apical meristems. That's at the tips of the roots and the tips of the shoots. Allows the plants to have their roots grow longer and their shoots grow taller. But then secondary growth deals with expanding girth and creating wood. Wood is proliferating xylem. So if you look at a cross section of a wooden plant, you can see that you have this girth growth, okay, and that's due to the secondary xylem and secondary phloem that makes up the wood. Okay, so that was your brief introduction to seed plants. So we've covered two chapters on plants, the seedless plants and the seed plants. Until next time, this has been Dr. Sage.